We put up at Nassau for a few days. I took up skin diving. I went below to see the beautiful underwater sights, and I took with me underwater guns. I went for stingrays with a bow and steel-tipped arrows, and shot several big 200-pound fellows. I loved it. The old feeling for the sea was back upon me again. If I could only make Lily like it as I did, but she stayed about the deck, petulant. It was a pleasure to be away from Hollywood. Here was the clean, cold salt water, and you could heal yourself of all kinds of inner hurts. Life photographers shot pictures of me around Miami, having fun in swim trunks. I was surprised to find myself on the cover of that magazine on May 23, 1938. Errol Flynn, glamour boy, it said in white on a black background. There I was, looking eager, young, happy, posed with my chin on my fist, wearing a thin line of mustache, and looking gaily at the world, on top of which, supposedly, I was sitting. The World's Fair was on at the time, and one of the stunts of the fair was the burying of a time capsule deep underground, about 100 feet or so. In this capsule, they placed one copy each of a half dozen or so of the respective United States publications: the New York Times, Herald Tribune, Daily Worker, Newsweek, Life, one or two others, I believe. The reasoning was that 1,000 years from now, when this capsule was to be unearthed, historians would find these publications and would have a look at what was going on at this moment in time. My picture on Life's cover went underground along with the other materials. My prestige was high in the land at that hour. That issue of Life noted the release of my last vehicle, The Adventures of Robin Hood. The critics were kind enough to say that I had replaced Douglas Fairbanks and that only I, in Hollywood, could handle the Robin Hood role in pictures as in my private life. That picture, too, like Captain Blood, was destined to become an enormous moneymaker for the Warners. The sea was big enough to absorb the irritants with Lily, and I was now in good shape physically. My claim of illness must have looked unconvincing at Warner's when they picked up Life and saw me harpooning fish and skin diving. They sent their troubleshooter, Bill Guthrie, to see me. Am I supposed to see you looking so well? Guthrie said slyly. That's only the sun. You mind if the doctor examines you? If he wants to. What seems to be the matter? I don't know what it is, but every time I put my hand out, it shakes. I'm a mass of nerves. I didn't tell him that beyond my genuine need for this period of relaxation. I wanted my contract revamped with more direction rights and with script approval. Others had these provisions, and I was determined to have what they had. The doctor examined me, paid no attention to my complaints, said I was in perfect health. Guthrie's report to the studio was that I was malingering. It was nonsense that I was a mass of nerves due to bad scripts. I resumed picture making, Virginia City, The Seahawk, Santa Fe Trail, Footsteps in the Dark, and I renewed my connubial war with Lily. The pattern of separation and reconciliation with her continued for 2 more years. Physically, I had made a break from her when Coates and I dashed off for Spain. Now I could take her or leave her, and I played the field as I held forth in my own bachelor apartment. Lily had been brought to Hollywood in 1928 by Sam Goldwyn to replace Vilma Banky as Ronald Colman's leading lady. Her arrival broke up the Coleman-Banky team, and in 1929 there appeared The Rescue. The following year, she had the lead in The Bridge of San Luis Rey. She was in 3 other pictures that year, including The Cockeyed World with Victor McLagan and Edmund Lowe, which was a sequel to The Big Parade. The next year, she played with Gary Cooper in Fighting Caravans and in 2 other pictures. In 1932, her picture This Is the Night introduced Cary Grant to the public. She made only 2 pictures in the next 2 years. In the year when I arrived, she played the second lead to Margaret Lindsay in Frisco Kid with Jim Cagney and Ricardo Cortez. The last film she did was The Devil on Horseback in 1936 or 37. A total of about 14 or 15 films. Not at all a bad record. Lily's possessiveness upset our relationship from the start. I've seen this trait wreck more lives than it was helped. Women try to make the man a personal prize. The way I see it, if you love someone, you will love him enough to want to see him free and unfettered. But the feeling that you own someone grows out of the whole archaic, priest-ridden concept of monogamy. It is not man's natural state to be monogamous. Neither is it woman's. The proof of this is in the well-known rejection of the whole standard by so many people. If this weren't true, so much of our modern literature and movie entertainment wouldn't be given over to dealing with this theme and this condition. We call ourselves a Christian world. We have alleged standards, and we hypocritically evade them. So the divorce courts are full. There's a lot of clandestine contact that never reaches court. We have pornographic appeal in all our art studies structures, all adding up to a very dubious morality. The Christian concept of monogamy is to me nothing more than a travesty on human nature. It doesn't work. Never will. For myself, I will say only that I've tried not to conceal, not to live a private life, as it is known, and therefore not to be a damned hypocrite. I cannot skulk around corners, or hide in dark alleys, or have a mistress stashed away somewhere, or a lady who must meet me at a secret rendezvous. I'm utterly incapable of being clandestine. To hide in dark corners and behind buildings, or in cleverly arranged apartments in New York, or Paris, or London, goes against my nature. Let the public guardians of morality do these things. A psychologist once observed me. One of the reasons for the public interest in you as a personality is that there is a certain amount of general male identification with the life you lead. Many men would like to be living as you are doing. I don't know whether this is true, but if it is in some small way true, then it is a focus on the dilemma of the national male facing the distaffed side of the population, armed or underarmed with the strange code he has been given in childhood. Bit by bit, I was permitted on the fringes of the Olympiads. This was a close-knit group to which there was no entry except uniqueness. These were not acting stars. There were no stars at all. Stardom was not the basis of membership. One guy would be a bum, and the other would be making $5,000 a week. Mostly they were men of note like Sadichi Hartman, a half-Japanese, half-German, who had every pulpit preaching against him. He was a complete bohemian who wrote a book called The Last 30 Days of Christ. He tried to prove that the only real honest disciple of Christ was Judas. It was a view not generally shared. John Decker, the artist, was the center of the club, and secondly, John Barrymore. Decker rated generally as the best artist in Hollywood and one of the best in the country. Gene Fowler, the writer, was a fabulous raconteur and a gifted writer, a figure of great wit and charm, and the kind Olympiads depended on for their existence. He and Barrymore were close. Others were Gene Markey, the screenwriter, Alan Mowbray, the actor, W.C. Fields, the comic, and actor Mitchell. There were others, of course, who came and went, or were on the edges of the group, and who might be close friends of one or another in the circle. All of us tried to be profound, or entertaining, or witty. I think we thought of ourselves as essentially philosophic. What characterized us was the range of personal experience which we had each had, physical or mental, something unique or special. One or two might even be abysmal mentally, or body, but outstanding in some particular way. We met at various houses, but most of the entertaining was in Decker's old house on Bundy Drive, Hollywood. He had decorated the interior with many pictures, including some that, I suppose, would be regarded by a few as obscene. His place was appropriate for a gathering of oddballs. The house was in a constant stage of siege from their presence. It was doubtless the most unique center of personalities in the community. Sometimes it functioned as a debating group, a thing that is lacking in society today. Conversation was then the dominant art. There was no radio, no television going at our bull sessions. By and large, we thought we were disgusted with politics and politicians. We fought over Roosevelt, either hating or loving him. Very often, one or another of us went home feeling mad as hell, for no two of us ever agreed on any one subject. Once I spouted for 10 minutes on Sir Julian Huxley because I knew something of him through my father. They listened, perhaps surprised to hear issuing from me this interest in evolution. I did far more listening than talking. The only thing I could talk about was my tales of New Guinea. They lifted their eyebrows skeptically. When I told them a lobster reminded me of a baked crocodile I had once eaten on the banks of the Lailoki River in New Guinea, I couldn't help but notice the patronizing, pained looks. They still thought I came from Ireland, I guess. People who joined the group or had entree were strange, or strange things had happened to them. Maybe a fellow had been to the Amazon, so they listened to him. I had introduced Coates to them. In a few minutes, Coates dispelled any doubts as to his general nuttiness and eligibility for their attention. One character, the most fabulous bore in the world, had the serious attention of the Olympiads for a time for exclusively that reason. They believed that he was the greatest bore since the mutations that changed the ape into a man. In fact, from this character there arose a subsidiary group which we call the Oh Shit Club. The idea was to let a bore corner you in any gathering and allow him to tell you the story of his life or to pour out his soul. Our rule was, let the bore speak for 2.5 minutes. At the end of this time, you looked him right in the eye and you said, "Oh shit." Then you walked away. You had to say this and do this whether the bore was a man or a woman. If you were caught lowering your eyes, the others would be watching as you handled the bore, and if you muttered the fatal words as you turned away, you were expelled. You had to do this forthrightly, bravely, and with direct eye-to-eye contact. We got our kicks. W.C. Fields was held forth about his vaudeville days. Since he and Jack Barrymore were pretty much contemporaries, Jack would interrupt with a story that hinged on one Fields might be telling. Fields was called Claude, for C. He had a gloriously tall and willowy secretary who hovered in the background, serving him, taking care of his needs, anticipating his requirements. He had a hobby of clipping newspapers, taking out bizarre items and sending them to his friends with his own comments such as, "There, you see what a stupid world it is." It was a bit of self-flattery for the Olympiads to call themselves by this name, but perhaps the group was entitled to do so. There were few actors among them. Anthony Quinn and myself, both just coming up, were more or less tolerated. Edward G. Robinson, in spite of his interest in art, wasn't admitted. The boys didn't seem to like him, even though he was a very good art collector. They seemed to think that he took himself too seriously. For a while, I teamed up with Decker in something we called the Flynn Decker Art Gallery. It was in an upstairs studio right behind the Macombo. There we had exhibitions for which the usually casual Decker even dressed. He would put on a black stock, a kind of cloth folded high under the neck, which would make him look very arty. Out of my association with Decker and the Olympiads came my later interest in art and the purchase of some Van Goghs, Gauguins, and other masters. Lupe Velez and Lily were more or less rivals. They had acted together in several successful pictures. Lupe, the Mexican Spitfire, was as wild as Tiger Lil, but they were friendly, as far as women of that kind can be friendly. The same kind of friendship that a female octopus or a giant squid has for another of the same species. There is mutual respect, at least. Lupe had a unique ability to rotate her left breast. Not only that, she counter-rotated it, a feat so supple and beautiful to observe that you couldn't believe your eyes. Beyond that, her breasts were probably the most beautiful that even Hollywood has ever seen. Eddie Goulding, the director, was a good friend of Lupe's. He played a trick on her. He told her that I was madly in love with her, that I could think of nobody but her, that I couldn't eat or sleep because of her. She must get in touch with me. I was asleep after a hard day's work. At about 1 a.m., the phone kept ringing, and I tossed and ignored it. But finally, so that I could sleep, I answered the damn thing. It was Lupe. She spoke with a Mexican lilt, using R's plentifully and 2 G's or so at the end of each darling. She said sweetly into my ears, "Errol, I must see you, darling." I had already seen her rotate her breasts clockwise, counterclockwise, north and south. "Please don't come over, Lupe. I'm dog-tired." "I'm just around the block at Johnny's." Johnny Weissmuller's house. "Errol, please." No, Lupe. Honest to Jesus, don't. I'm tired out tonight." "Honey, don't you worry. I'll be there in a minute." I put the phone back in its cradle very nervously, because actually Lupe wasn't my type. I thought at first of locking the door, but I had seen Lupe in action. I realized any kind of barricade was no defense against her. Like Lily, she was tough, and she had made up her mind. Eddie Goulding had worked her into a pitch from where there was only one return, for her and for me. I hardly had time to bite my lower lip with nervousness when I heard the crunch of car tires. "That's Lupe and her new cord," I said to myself. The brake pulled up with an inevitable, even sexual warning. There was a pounding at the front door. I buttoned up a robe and let her in. Mark you, don't get the impression Lupe wasn't terribly attractive. She just wasn't my type. I'd been through so much violence that I was unable to cope with it anymore. In particular, I couldn't cope with women of this type. Like Lily, I wasn't capable of being tough and catching a woman by her hair and the seat of her pants and throwing her out the door. She bounded up the stairs into my bedroom. I protested I was more exhausted than I really was. I took one good look at her and realized I was terribly awake. She started to undress, singing an enchanting little Mexican song at the same time. In the dim light, she was a vision of beauty. She fell on her knees beside the bed. For a while, we were much engaged. Then her eyes moved. She looked upward at my dresser and let out a little gasp. There stood the hacked-up figurine of my Madonna and child from Spain. She stopped what she was doing. I glanced at her, then at the little memento. At that instant, she leaned back in the most religious pose on her little knees, more beautiful than ever. Her naked little body was itself a figurine of delicacy and ecstasy as she posed in the dim light. She prayed to the headless Madonna and child to forgive her for what she was doing. I watched fascinated as she said a couple of Ave Marias, telling some invisible beads. Having absolved herself, a smile opened on her momentarily, spiritually clothed face, and she again took up the subject of Flynn.